Welcome to worship at the McPherson Church of the Brethren. We are an open and affirming congregation that strives to be hospitable and attentive to all of creation. We do not always meet that goal, and we have our share of ups and downs. But in the midst of it all, we continue to listen to God's call on our individual lives and the life of this congregation. We continue to seek to follow Jesus, peacefully, simply, together. We are humbled you have chosen to worship with us. Welcome.
Welcome to the McPherson Church of the Brethren. Welcome to those of you on Channel 13, those of you at the Cedars watching, and as we've traveled this summer, we found out people all over the United States that tune in to this worship service, so welcome to all of you. I want to take this opportunity for you to stand and at a distance, welcome each other. It's so good to be back in community. We haven't been here since March of last year, so it's good to be back in the sanctuary. Announcements.
Like that? Oh, okay. Hi. It's good to be back. Just got back from Camp Colorado, so that was pretty awesome. Shout out to Paul and Allison. That was awesome. I have an announcement for VBS. We will be doing it this week, Monday through Friday, 9 to 11:30. If you want to help out, we still need volunteers. It'd be fantastic for you all to bring your gifts. We will be having a meeting at the Mennonite Church at 12:30, so right after church. The faster we get done, the faster we get lunch.
It's so nice to be here. I'm just full of joy for being able to be back at the church for the first time in a long time. And when my daughter gave me permission this week to come, I was overjoyed. She checked with my 2 great-grandchildren who are doctors at Johns Hopkins, and they said, yes, I could go to church. So here I am. And I'm just so happy to be here.
Did we ever think we'd have to ask our kids for permission to do something?
Yesterday, Phil and I had the pleasure of bringing, can I just hold it? Yeah. We had the pleasure of bringing 8 junior high kids back from Camp Colorado. They had such a great time. We were hoping they'd be really tired and go to sleep, but that never really happened. They just talked the entire time. And it was interesting as the driver listening to their conversation. Of course, there was lots of predictable boyfriend-girlfriend kind of talk. But the most interesting probably was about the rat that lives in somebody's wall. And it is much loved by the whole family, referred always by the he, or that she, her pronouns. And one of the boys said, how do you know it's a girl? And the answer was, because we decided.
Any other announcements? We'll ask you to take this moment to center yourself, to listen for God's wisdom.
Please continue to be in prayer for all of our members who are making that long trip to and from camp, and our students who are hiking and trying to stave off sunburns, and finding God. So many kids find God and find themselves at camp, and we're so grateful that they have that opportunity. Please pause with me as we invoke our full presence in God's presence. God, we pray to listen to you, to your inner voice, to the inner yearning that we have to belong to something greater than ourselves. Help us, God, to listen to you. Your inner spirit in us, help us to find inside of us the presence of your encouraging wisdom. Amen. I invite you to rise and join in singing Immortal Invisible. It's on number 70, and if you do not have a hymnal, we'd like you to raise your hand. We put them back, but we're not sure we got them all in, so please rise. Our children are at camp, our children are soccering, our children are tetherballing, our children will be doing vacation Bible school. I will tell you that during the pandemic, it was really important to us in worship to continue to have a children's story, because we all know that there are many children in town that watch our worship, that hear our children's time and our children's story, and we had some delightful sharing during that time. I want to share with the children. Lots of times adults learn from the children's stories, so you can sneak in and see what you learn, but I will be speaking to the children this morning. Wisdom. What is wisdom? Wisdom's kind of a tough word. It's hard to know what wisdom is. Some people think they know, some people think they don't. If I tell you that my hair is green, and you're going to say, really, Catherine, your hair is not green. But I told you that was a fact, that my hair was green. But you look at my hair and you say, it's not green. And so you're pretty wise when you do that, because you use all your eyes and ears and senses and what you know about colors, and you know that my hair is not green. And we would call that being wise. Let's think about if you have a friend who says, I just love my dog, I really love my dog, and then you see that friend throwing rocks at their dog or kicking that dog, your friend's saying that the fact is they love their dog, but then they're not acting like they love their dog. So you're very wise if you're paying attention to whether that person is petting their dog and talking gently to their dog, or whether they are kicking that dog. Or you might hear someone on the playground say, so-and-so and so-and-so is my best friend, just absolutely my best friend. So you're hearing that fact, and you're hearing them say it, but then they're being mean to that person, and they're talking about them behind their back. And you're very wise when you're paying attention to that behavior, because you know what's being said doesn't quite match what that person is doing. And so that's wisdom. And Jesus was a very, very, very wise person. And lots of people said lots of things, even people who were teaching about the Bible and teaching about God, and who were called themselves Christians after Jesus died. And they were saying, oh, I love people, and here's how you treat people. And yet when they went to act that way, they didn't act that way. And Jesus listened and paid attention and said, you know what? God tells us to love one another. God tells us to care for one another, to be present for one another. So Jesus saw people not doing what they were saying. And so what Jesus did, what's really unique about Jesus, is Jesus said that he loved people, and then Jesus acted like he loved people. And that's God's wisdom. So wisdom sometimes sounds like a hard word to understand, but you are smart, and you actually are wise every day. You know how to do exactly what we talked about. So this week, I want you to pay attention not only to what people are saying, but what people are doing. And I want you to know that you're wise, to know. And then I want you to think about how you can love people, how you can follow Jesus and follow the wisdom of God, and how you can not just say that you love people, but that you can also actually, in your actions and how you treat people, love people. So you got this. You got the idea of wisdom. We know that you're out doing a lot of things, doing camp and doing traveling, and that's so exciting this summer, because you haven't been able to do that for a while. So we're here for you. We love you, and we hope you have a great week, and we will talk to you next week when it's Father's Day. Take care. We love you.
Thank you for your continued financial donations. You may give online at maccob@macbrethren.org. That's maccob@macbrethren.org. You may mail your gift to the church office at 200 North Carey Street, McPherson, Kansas, 67460. Or hand deliver your check to the church office. Just push it through the mail slot at the Education Building. If you join our worship from afar, please donate to local needs in your area. Thank you for sharing.
You have your scriptures printed for you this morning in your order of worship. I will be sharing some of that as we share this morning and think about these scriptures in this lectionary text. And we'll not be sharing those scriptures in their entirety, but I encourage you to take that worship bulletin home, to read through there, and then leap off wherever your interest goes with those scriptures, and then to recycle that when you are done. In the story of the Garden of Eden in Genesis, we learn that God gives humankind everything they need, everything. And then God says, the only way you can really mess this up is if you do one thing that I'm going to tell you not to do. The only way to mess up this perfect situation is to eat of the fruit from the tree of knowledge. Eating that fruit will give you more knowledge than you can comprehend. Eating that fruit will put you in a dither and a ceaseless state of quandary, and you will never again know the peace that you now know. Always and forever after, you will be in a state of anxiety. You will feel a predicament, a jam. You will wonder which choices are the right choices. So, with that, God leaves them in the Garden of Eden, the perfect place with everything they need, with that one caution: do not eat of the forbidden fruit. And of course, they disobey and they partake of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. They eat, and they don't even realize the problem until God visits them again. And that's where we join them in the 3rd chapter, verses 8 through 15. They heard the sound of God walking in the garden at the time of the evening breeze, and the man and the woman hid themselves from the presence of God among the trees of the garden. And God said, "Where are you?" And the man said, "I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid myself." God said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, which I commanded you not to eat?" And the man didn't answer. Instead, he pointed a finger and said, the woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me the fruit from the tree, so I ate it." And then God said to the woman, "What have you done?" And she didn't answer him. She pointed and she said, the serpent. It was the serpent. The serpent tricked me and I ate. And God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you among all animals, among all wild creatures. Upon your belly you shall go, dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and hers. It will strike your head. You will strike its heel. In this verse of God, this setup, we learn that what God intends is for us to be at peace and to trust God and to trust in God's wisdom. God really wants us to be free and unfettered from all those stresses and pressures of having to decide. God doesn't want us to be filled with angst and anxiety that is produced when we're just not sure what we should do. In my family, not to decide was to decide. There were always so many options. What if I chose the wrong option? It was always difficult to decide if the voice was my voice or God's voice or family history voice coming at me. Which was the voice of foolishness and which was the voice of irrationality? The moment that we got our head turned from the wisdom of God, the moment we turned to the woman, turned to the snake, turned to media, turned to politicians, turned to our Instagram account, turned to the algorithm on our Facebook page, the minute we turned to the powers and principalities of this world to make our decisions, that's when we began to have a lot of problems. That moment when we can no longer hear God because of the clutter in our heads is the moment when we become susceptible to all the vagaries of the world, the caprices, the impulses that we know of the human condition. I think for me, one of the saddest elements of the Garden of Eden story is they eat from the tree of knowledge and they have no idea the magnitude of their error. They're so busy blaming one another, pointing a finger. They aren't even repentant because they don't even know what they've lost. They don't even seem sorry. They're so enamored of that other voice that they're clueless about the terrible loss they have sustained. In our scriptures for this Sunday, we have another example of this same blindness, the same ignorance as people turn and are tempted by what is of this world, but not of God. So I invite you into 1 Samuel. We've been moving around the book of 1 Samuel for some time and paying attention to what's going on with Samuel. And in this chapter, we read that the people are demanding that Samuel appoint a king for them. And they don't want just any king. They want a king who's exactly like the king that everybody else in the world has. That's the kind of king they want. Even if that means that they're going to suffer for it. They just want what they want. Eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. We want a king like everybody else. And they're just unaware of what they're going to lose. So in 1 Samuel 8, we read, all the elders of Israel gathered together, and they came to Samuel at Ramah and said, you are old, and your sons do not follow in your ways, so then appoint for us a king to govern us just like other nations. But this thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to govern us. So Samuel prayed to God, and God said to Samuel, go ahead, listen to the voice of the people and all they say to you, and understand they have not rejected you. They have rejected me from being king over them. Just as they have done to me from the day I brought them out of Egypt to this day, they forsake me, serve other gods, and now they are doing that to you. So go ahead, listen to their voice. Only warn them, solemnly warn them, and show them the ways of the king who shall reign over them. So Samuel reported these words of God to the people who were asking him for a king, and he said, these will be the ways of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them to chariots and horsemen, and it will cause them to run before chariots. He will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and some to plow his ground and reap his harvest. And to make his implements of war and the equipment of chariots, he will take your daughters to be perfumers, cooks, bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive orchards and give them to the people at court. He will take 1/10 of your grain and your vineyard and give it to his officers and the people of the court. He will take your male and female slaves, the best of your cattle and donkeys, and put them to work. He will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you will be his slaves. And in that day, you will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves. And on that day, God will not answer you. But the people refused to listen to the voice of Samuel, and they said, "No, we are determined to have a king over us so that we may be like other nations, and our king may govern us and go out before us and fight our battles." So Samuel said, "Okay, let us go to Gilgal, and we will renew the kingship." So all the people went to Gilgal, and they made Saul king before God. And there they sacrificed offerings of well-being before God, and there Saul and the Israelites rejoiced. They didn't even know what they were going to be losing. They just wanted it, because that was the voice out in popular culture. That's what everybody else was doing. I don't know how many of you remember 2 weeks ago we were talking about King Saul, and we were talking about how he was immersed in battle. And he went to battle, and all of his sons were killed in battle. And he was confronted, and he was afraid he was going to be captured, so he committed suicide. He fell on his own sword. So this king that they were so desperate to have nominated to be king, that Samuel went ahead and anointed as king, is the king who did exactly what God said was going to happen. And all of his line died, and he killed himself so he would not be captured. And I don't know if you remember, but at the time Saul died, Samuel was in terrible grief. Samuel knew what was lost. Samuel knew what had been forfeited. And he cried out to God, and God said, "Go to Jesse in Bethlehem, and I will show you the king that you will anoint." And all those sons were paraded before Saul, and God said, "No, no, 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 no," until we got to David. Remember that story? We got to David, and that lowly shepherd boy David, with all his flaws and all his crazy things that he did, that's the one that God said will be king of the people. They had to have their own way. They had to listen to the world. The low spot is when God leads Samuel to this spot where he says, "Go ahead, do what they're asking. We all know how this is going to turn out, but go ahead. They need to find out the hard way." Both of these Old Testament scriptures, as well as many, many others, highlight the clear message of the folly of looking for wisdom from this world. Both of these Old Testament scriptures make it clear that the only true source of wisdom is God. They indicate the source of wisdom is God, and God is the source that we should turn to. I'm not sure how much we listen to God's wisdom. It's difficult. We don't know how to talk about wisdom to kids, and I'm not sure we know how to talk about wisdom to teenagers for sure when they're having a cacophony of people telling them what to do. And I'm not sure we ever learn that lesson as adults. We have to be vigilant. We have to pay attention. We have to be intentional to listen to God. I am aware of that very much right now, as you are, as you listen to news, as you listen to your feed, whether it's about masks or vaccinations or election results or religion or taxes. The vote that just happened on Tuesday for USD 14. Whose wisdom should we have listened to when we went to vote? And all of those voices are binary. They're this or that. They're painted as only two perspectives in the world. And depending on where you land, which side of that line you cross, then you get a label. You're either conservative, or you're liberal, or you're Democrat, or you're Republican, or you're a socialist, or you're a patriot, or you're godless, or you're God-filled. I think it has been so odd during the pandemic to see that polarism. Everything has turned into politics, and everything is polarized. And we claim to be Christians. And I think, where is God's wisdom? Are we listening to God's wisdom? I wish my life could be so easy sometimes. And sometimes people choose that. They choose answers that are either or. Make one choice, here's a choice, here's a choice, make one, and one of those is the right one. I think sometimes it would be easy to go through life that way, and I wouldn't lay awake at night, and I wouldn't stress, and I wouldn't worry about my choices so much. I recently got caught by a headline with the title of a word I just had never heard before, and so I may be showing my own ignorance here. It's just something I'd never heard, and so I went down the proverbial rabbit hole, and about 8 articles later, and the term was moral panic. Have you guys heard that term? It's been in the news lately, moral panic. And moral entrepreneurship? I was like, moral entrepreneurship? What the heck? So I want to, before I share with you, I want to acknowledge that the small bit of information I'm sharing with you is from Wikipedia, which is terrible of me to do. Thank you, all you educators, because students are not allowed to use Wikipedia as a source because it is crowdsourced and you don't know when the last time somebody vetted it and whether it's accurate or not. And as a student, you are not allowed to turn in anything that you got off of Wikipedia. So I'm just naming that. I know what I'm doing. I didn't let my kids use Wikipedia. So having said that, here's the definition based on Wikipedia. Moral panic is a widespread feeling of fear, often an irrational one. A fear that some evil person or thing threatens the values, interests, and well-being of a community or society. It is the process of arousing social concern over an issue. It is usually perpetrated by moral entrepreneurs and the mass media, and it is exacerbated by politicians and lawmakers. Whoa, does that sound like what's going on right now? This is crazy. And then they had a list, an example of what are examples of moral panic. And I thought, it's going to be the last 4 years. This must be a new term. And I felt so ignorant. This is a really old concept. It's been around for a long time. Okay, here's an example of moral panic. The communism scare in the 1940s and 50s, okay? Get everybody panicked, get everybody riled up. Are you a communist or are you not? Dungeons and Dragons. Remember that? I remember when Chris and I were in student services early in our 20s, and students would stay up all night and play Dungeons and Dragons in the lobby of the dorm, and they were going to be corrupted, and it was the devil, and we shouldn't let them play Dungeons and Dragons all night. I mean, I remember that so clearly, that student services should be doing something wholesome to keep students from being taken by the devil playing Dungeons and Dragons. HIV and AIDS, right? A moral panic. It wasn't a health concern that needed to be addressed. It was some visitation of evil on the world for what we had not done right. Violence and video games. Tell you what, I really tried as a parent. My first child was a girl. My second child, I had at 42, so I had an extra special sonogram in Wichita to make sure everything was okay. And it was clear it was a boy. And the sonogram tech said, oh, do you want to know what it is? I'm like, well, hello, turtle. And I burst into tears. I remember bursting into tears, and she was like, oh, do you already have a boy? And I said, no, I have a girl, and I'm a strong woman, and I know how to raise a girl. I have no idea what to do with a boy. And I cried and I cried and I cried, and then I was, going to be egalitarian, and I was going to raise my kids so they both felt like they had the full spectrum of the world, and if whoever wanted to play with trucks or dolls, whoever wanted to paint their nails, grow their hair long, grow their hair short, I was going to give them the whole span of the opportunity. And then they did some very traditional boy-girl things. And one of the things they did is they came of age during video games, right? And during computers. And I think one of the first things they played was, I wish they were here. They played something where you could hop around and get jewels. It was Lord of the Rings. It was a Lord of the Rings. And so you could go on the journey and you could get treasures and you could build up. And so my daughter, her whole goal in every level was to do the whole process and to collect every gift she could and every jewel and to build up points. And my son was all about get through and get to the next level so you can go on. And I was so taken aback. And then they transitioned to, I thought it would be broadening to have my son as a 7th grader, he was a 5th grader, be in the chorus of Music Man, right? What a good thing. Have your kid be around older students and doing music and being part of a musical. I later learned he sat in the back hallway when he was off stage, and those senior high, junior high boys taught him how to play Halo. Halo's a really violent video game. And that was his first experience of learning to play Halo. So I remember that whole drama and forcing myself to understand video games and thinking, the moral panic is my point. I thought, oh my gosh, he's not gonna understand about death and guns and weapons, and we're conscientious objectors, and I'm letting him play violent. It was horrible, and we would vet, and then I would say, you can play this game, but only when I'm in the room, and we have to play it together, and I have to see what you're doing. And and my daughter wanted no part of it. She absolutely wanted no part of it. And I remember the one time, I was so worried, what is the wisdom here? What should I be doing? And I went in, and I started to go in his room, and our policy is you always knock, and his door was ajar, and I heard him just talking to friends. And I stood in the hallway, and they were not shooting and killing and getting through the game. They were literally using the characters in that terrible, bloody video game like paper dolls. I kid you not. They were changing their armor, and they were changing their weapons, and they were changing their hairstyle, and they were changing the boat or the tank or the whatever, and they were talking to each other the whole time. And I thought, oh my gosh, he is relating to other guys that he's playing Halo with, and this is a place to socialize and to dress up the guys with the weapons, just like my daughter played paper dolls and dress up with her dolls. And I thought, okay, I need to calm down, and I need to silence the voice of moral panic and moral entrepreneurs who are telling me that video games are going to be the end of my children and the end of society as we know it. And I need to listen to my kid, and I need to read and pay attention and be still. And when I was still, was able to see my kids for who they were and the wonderful children they were, and how kind they were to animals and to old people, and respectful and caring of the earth. And that is God's wisdom. That is God's wisdom. That is the difference between moral panic and moral entrepreneurs who peddle fear for their own advantage. It's not about us, it's about them. It's about power and dynamics. Adam eats of the tree of knowledge because the woman told him to. Eve eats of the tree of knowledge because the snake told her to. We consume the wisdom of this world because everywhere we turn, we are bombarded with the reasons and rationales of this world that scream loudly at us and whisper malevolently, come over to our side, come over to our side, the right side. We silence them with the still, small voice of God that we calm ourselves and listen to internally. Jesus preached and taught and lived an upside-down life, where the guiding principle was the wisdom of God, the love and grace of God. God calls us and wants us to listen to that wisdom, not to the voices of this world, not to moral panic spread by moral entrepreneurs for their own selfish purposes. God wants us not to be seduced by the man, the woman, the serpent, the video game, the media. God wants us to listen to the spark of the divine within our very souls. In the book of Job, in the 28th chapter, there is a beautiful lyrical piece of poetry that describes the nature of God's wisdom. I want to share that with you as my closing remarks. This interpretation is from the scripture, the Message. It comes from Job 28. And the topic of this section is, where does wisdom come from? We all know how silver seams the rocks, and we've seen the stuff from which gold is refined. We are aware of how iron is dug out of the ground and copper is smelted from rock. Miners penetrate the earth's darkness, searching the roots of the mountains for ore, digging away in the suffocating darkness. Far from civilization, far from the traffic, they cut a shaft and are lowered into it by ropes. Earth's surface is a field for grain, but its depths are a forge. Firing sapphires from stones and chiseling gold from rocks, vultures are blind to its riches. Hawks never lay eyes on it. Wild animals are oblivious to it. Lions don't know it's there. Miners hammer away at the rock. They uproot the mountains. They tunnel through the rock and find all kinds of beautiful gems. They discover the origins of rivers and bring Earth's secrets to light. But where, oh, where will they find wisdom? Where does insight hide? Mortals don't have a clue, haven't the slightest idea where to look. Earth's depths say, it is not here. Ocean's deeps echo, never heard of it. It cannot be bought with the finest gold. No amount of silver can get it. Even famous gold cannot buy it, not even diamonds and sapphires. Neither gold nor emeralds are comparable. Extravagant jewelry cannot touch it. Pearl necklaces, ruby bracelets, why bother? None of this is even a down payment on wisdom. Pile gold and African diamonds as high as you will, they cannot hold a candle to wisdom. So where does wisdom come from? And where does insight live? It cannot be found by looking, no matter how deep you dig, no matter how high you fly. If you search through the graveyard and question the dead, they will say, we have only heard rumors of it. God alone knows the way to wisdom. God knows the exact place to find it. God knows where everything is on the earth. God sees everything under heaven. After God commanded the winds to blow and measured out the waters, arranged for the rain, and set off explosions of thunder and lightning, God focused on wisdom, made sure it was all set and tested and ready. And then God addressed the human race. Here it is. Fear of the Lord, that's wisdom. And insight means shunning all other temptations. May it be so. I invite you to rise and join in singing Be Thou My Vision, number 545. Invite you to be seated, to remain seated for the litany that we're going to share, and then remain seated for the postlude. And I'd like to do something a little different. This litany is written by Jan Berry, and it is titled A Litany in Times of Change and Traveling On. And I don't know about you, but when I am participating in worship, I get weary of being relegated to the repeat part, the repeat part, the repeat part, and whoever is worship leading or preaching gets to do the great part with all the words and the meaning. So I would like to flip this litany. I will read the repetitive part, and I would like you to begin by starting with When Hope. Please join me. When hope, to journey elusive, beckoning onward, but never in our grasp. God of wisdom and promise, give us courage to travel on. When dreams glimmer in the distance, fading, clouded, and hidden or shining with new brightness, God of wisdom and promise, give us courage to travel on. When established patterns collapse into the uncertainty of the unknown, and security dissolves into a memory, God of wisdom and promise, give us courage to travel on. when the illusion of success threatens to divert us and silence our soul's yearning. God of wisdom and promise, give us courage to travel on. When we think our journey has ended in the starlit glow, only to find the end is a new beginning, please say with me together, God of wisdom and promise, give us courage to travel on.